Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining the webinar. SCIE are delighted to see that we have got lots and lots of people joining from all over the country and indeed from Europe and from Spain. So hello to all of you. Thank you for joining. First things first, just to say that unfortunately Alex Fox, who was going to talk about the Shared Lives for People Living Care programme, is unable to join us because, like me, he has had one of these throaty coughs and is unable to speak very clearly, in fact, at all. So nearly lost his voice. So sorry to say, Alex is not joining us. However, SCIE will be providing a blog and some information about the Shared Lives programme. So you will have an opportunity to find out more about that after today. However, we do have Rachel Leslie from Staying Close, who is going to speak today about the programme that she runs for the Break charity, Staying Connected. And Meg Brady, Associate from Social Finance, who is also going to talk about a programme that they're running there called Leaving Well, which is another very different but very interesting innovation for care leavers. We do have a few people saying they can't hear, so apologies if that's you. We're actually just dealing with that now. Everyone should be able to hear. Turn the volume up, someone said. Maybe that's the issue, so turn it up. Okay, great. So we have Rachel and Meg, and we will be presenting the two innovations, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions via the chat. Please do ask questions at any point. So if you just write your question in the box, we will be having a look at those questions and either respond as they come up, or we'll draw them all together in themes and address them at the appropriate moment. There'll also be an opportunity to ask questions right at the end of the webinar today, or indeed if you do want to follow up with any of us individually or with SCIE, you can feel free to get in contact with us via our social media or email, which we will give to you at the end. Just to say, you might feel that this is a good opportunity to connect with others, because there is lots of good work going on all across the country. And so if you do want to hear more about something that we have raised from a participant, do feel free to share contact details on the chat box, but just be aware that your emails will then be visible to everybody. So just be aware of that if you feel like you'd like to do that. Okay, shall we kick off? Right, so first of all, the key things we want to hear about today are what learning have some of these innovations started to identify in relation to a different type of support for young people leaving care, which we might be able to call strength-based in nature. So it's really around building resilience and skills and on the networks in the wider community in which a young person lives. We know that some of these innovations can make a positive difference, but there is more to be done to make sure that they do really make a difference to care leavers everywhere. So we'll also be thinking about what is needed out there in the system and in different places and regions to enable innovations to thrive. And so our speakers today will be touching on some of those opportunities and challenges, and we'd really like to hear from you about things that you've experienced or any questions along those lines. So over to Meg Brady, who, as I said, is an associate from Social Finance, who will be speaking about Leaving Well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Emma, and great to be here today. Actually, if I just switch to my slides. So I'm from an organisation called Social Finance, and we run an initiative called Leaving Well, which is a digital tool to help improve outcomes for young people leaving care. So Leaving Well is, at its core, it's a digital tool that puts care leavers at the heart of decisions for their future. It's designed around the pathway planning process, and it's really about making that process more useful for everyone involved. So it's about putting the young person's voice and experiences at the centre of that process, creating a process that's really easy and quick, for social workers and personal advisors to do, and also about kind of surfacing useful data and insight around outcomes for young people. So next slide. Great. So we've been as social finance started work around care leavers back in 2014, and we started with quite a lot of research into the sector and also conversations with local authorities, with young people and other experts in the sector. From all of that process, we started to understand some problems that we would really like to solve, and these are kind of the three issues that we think that Leaving Well as a digital tool is designed to solve. So from our conversations with young people, we really heard that they didn't feel like they had a voice in their transition to independence. So they felt like their pathway planning was a process that was really done to them, not with them. And in fact, some young people said they never saw their pathway plan and didn't know what was in it. So we see that Leaving Well is an opportunity to give young people agency and a voice in that process and really own that plan. We also heard from personal advisors that they were spending a huge amount of time on this process, which was very bureaucratic, hugely time-consuming, producing a document that wasn't then used again or wasn't referred to until 6 months' time when they had to look at it again. So what we wanted to do with Leaving Well is make pathway planning a much more dynamic process, so that it cuts down on that big administrative burden. And also is more of a live document, so that it changes and shifts as needs and context and things just happen in people's lives. Another big problem that we found was that managers and indeed kind of sector-wide, there wasn't enough really good quality data in order to understand what was working and what wasn't working, especially around the experience of young people and the outcomes that they are achieving. So through Leaving Well, we wanted to give managers in local authorities a better understanding of what the outcomes and experiences of young people were in real time, in order to make decisions around that data. So how does it work? Young people and personal advisors are able to log into the tool. So they're able to collaborate around their pathway plan. There are things called checklists, which I'll talk a little bit more further on, but really simple yes/no questions around how a young person is doing across different domains in their life. And there's another section on goals and actions. So what are those things that young people want to achieve, and what are the steps to get there? So putting those at the center of the plan. They can log into it at any time, keep it up to date, or indeed actually what we found that lots of people do is sit down and do it together, sitting there in the room together. And then once it's time, that kind of statutory deadline comes up, it can be turned into a PDF, which can be shared with everyone else who needs to see and be engaged with that plan. So I thought it would be helpful just to take a step back as to kind of where we started with all of this. So our first starting point with Leaving Well was really that we saw that across the sector, there was a lack of data in terms of understanding outcomes for young people, and not necessarily consensus around what those outcomes were or how they could be measured. So one of the first pieces of work that we did was around putting together an outcomes framework that could be used to understand and measure outcomes for young people as they transition into adulthood. So it's essentially a set of really simple yes/no questions sorted into domains, so things like housing, health and well-being, relationships, organized loosely in a kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we designed that alongside academics and other people across the sector. And then also kind of tested that with young people as well, to understand, were these meaningful questions to be asked, and are they asked in a way that makes makes sense for that. So that was kind of the starting present kind of point of this piece of work. So the next thing that we did was we wanted to be able to put this framework into practice, and this is where the digital tool came in. So the outcomes framework is now the kind of core of the tool. It forms what's called the checklists, and there's been quite a lot of interesting learning in terms of putting that into practice. We've adapted the outcomes framework in some way. And in some ways, we found that there were some domains missing. We heard from social workers and personal advisors that there was a need to explicitly call out things like independence and identity was a really important piece that needed to be explored more. So we introduced that domain. We also really changed the language. We found that these questions, we initially thought that this would be we wanted to collect data and be able to understand that data, but actually these questions were quite powerful prompts for conversations. And so that then meant shifting the language slightly in order to open a conversation around different domains and different issues. Great. So we've been piloting Leaving Well across a few different local authorities, and we've recently done an evaluation and alongside kind of workers and social workers and managers. And this has given us some quite useful learnings in terms of what's worked and what's gone well, and what's kind of coming out of the use of a digital tool in this space. But also quite a lot of learning in terms of where some of the challenges have been, and what some of the enabling conditions might be for how a digital tool could be most useful in improving outcomes for young people leaving care. So what we found is that through Leaving Well, young people felt more involved and greater ownership over their plans. I think this is quite a nuanced and interesting point in that we initially had hoped or thought that young people would log in independently into Leaving Well and kind of write their own thing. But actually what we found is the way that it's being used is much more in conversation with young people. So a worker sitting down with a young person and creating that plan alongside them, having a conversation around the checklists, which is slightly a different sort of ownership than we anticipated, but I think still quite, it does create kind of a sense of transparency and visibility of what is in their plan. So I guess the second piece around there is from the outcomes framework. Initially, we thought this would be useful information at kind of a manager level or at a local authority level. But what we did find is that it's a useful tool to be able to understand where their strengths are and kind of what's going really well for that young person, but also where there might be a little bit need for extra support as well.
Meg, on that, there are a few questions coming through, so it'd just be great to clarify a few things.
Yeah.
Given the framing for our webinar today around building strengths for young people, could you perhaps just say a little bit more about why you think a digital tool, and be it Leaving Well or any other type of digital tool, might be enabling in terms of building strengths, and what are some of the challenges there?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a couple of points around that. I think there is something around a digital tool in enabling transparency and enabling ownership of a plan. I think a lot of the time, because of the way that systems are set up, they're quite closed, and so young people just don't necessarily have knowledge of what's being said about them, or kind of what the next steps might be. So I think there is something quite powerful in just giving visibility and transparency over what is happening and why that is happening. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one piece where digital can come in. I think there's a second piece around setting goals, and one thing that we did find from our early research was around that pathway plans were often quite needs or risk focused. And what young people wanted to see, and actually what many personal advisors and social workers wanted to see, was that that plan becomes more forward-looking and strengths-based in some way, thinking about what could happen next and what might be possible. So I think that's another piece that we're starting to explore a little bit more about, how we can create plans that are forward-focused and have that visibility over this is what you're doing to support me, and this is what I'm doing for myself, and have that kind of dialogue around that.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. And there's some questions coming through about where this app has been piloted at the moment, which local authorities, if you're at liberty to say so. And also, some contributors are not working for a local authority, perhaps an independent fostering agency or a voluntary organisation. Are there opportunities for them to use a tool like Leaving Well?
Great. So firstly on where we're at, so Leaving Well is in use at the moment in 3 local authorities, Doncaster, Bradford and Coventry. So that's kind of where it's being used as the main pathway planning process at the moment. What we want to do now is we see that we're in this really interesting point where we've just completed a pilot. There's lots of learning coming through in terms of how digital could be used, where this tool could go, and how we as a sector could better enable an understanding of the data and use that data to gain an insight about what's working well and what's not working well. So we're really keen to kind of engage with people and understand what might be needed to help support your work.
Okay, so it could be used by different types of agencies, different types of worker, but there's work still to be done to identify that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And there's also a couple of questions just around how this app actually works. So we've got a question here around does it rely on young people having a smartphone? I asked this question, didn't I? So could you just tell us a little bit more about how the app works? How does it link in with services? What kind of information does it give us? And yes, is it on your phone?
Yeah, great. This is a question we get all the time. So it's not some people might say it's not an app. It's a web app, so it's accessible via any device via your internet browser. So it doesn't have to be a smartphone. It could be a computer. It could be any of those things. The reason for that was to try and maximize access and so that people don't have to have a smartphone, as I say. There was another part to that question there that
just about how does it link in with other services? What sort of information can it access and enable the worker and the young person to get to and to use? So in terms of looking to other services, that's something that we're really keen to explore more, actually. At the moment, it's really centred around that relationship between young person and personal advisor. So really about enabling that personal advisor to better understand needs, strengths, aspirations, feelings, all of those things. So it is centred on that relationship. However, part of our learning is really around that there is a need for other agencies to be involved and other people to be involved in that process and to really understand those needs, goals, aspirations, all of that as well. It is something that does open up a little bit of operational complexity, but we want to explore that more with people because we think it's really important. Of course, at the moment, the plan can be put into a PDF and shared with everyone who needs to know that plan. But in terms of being able to contribute, we want to understand what's the best way of doing that. Okay, so there's obviously a lot of development work still to be done, but a real opportunity. But on a practical level, does this cost something? Would this cost local agencies and local authorities something? Is it something they'd have to build into their plans and budgets?
Yeah, so as with any kind of digital piece, there is quite a lot of system maintenance and things like that, so there is a cost involved. I think that's something that we're really keen to explore with local authorities as well, because I think what we do recognise is that a digital tool is one part of the story, but there's also making sure that it fits within your existing practice model, and that staff feel really confident in using it and able to talk about it with young people. So we want to kind of understand what those needs are in order to make sure that you're able to use it really effectively and actually kind of unlock the potential of the tool, not just handing over a digital tool and expecting it all to land really well, recognising there's work to be done in terms of training and also adapting existing systems so that it can be used as smoothly and as well as possible.
Great. So actually, social finance would be interested to hear from others about how the best cost benefit could be realised and actually what some of the practical steps would be in your area and in your organisation to make something like this work. Is that right? That's great. There are some technical questions coming through, which I'm sure Meg will be able to answer, but I can't even make sense of these things. So can we pick up sort of real technical details, Meg, afterwards, and get back in touch with the individuals? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I imagine my email address will be shared, and I'm happy to respond to any specific questions around that.
Great, thank you. We should move on, because actually there are lots of synergies as well with the staying close, staying connected model that the Break charity are going to speak about today. Just to finish, because it seems like a good point to finish on, Julia has asked, what is the feedback from young people?
Great question, Julia. So quite positive in terms of having that kind of transparency over their plans for the future. So we've had that young people enjoy that process and also enjoy the fact that it is an app and being able to kind of respond to questions like that. I think it's something that we want to really go into more depth though, given now learning around how we found young people actually engage with the tool, so engage with it with their worker rather than independently. So it's something that we want to explore a lot more.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So there will be an opportunity for more questions after we've heard from Rachel, but now I think it would be brilliant to hear more about Staying Close, Staying Connected, which the Break charity have been pioneering. So over to you, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Emma. Hello, everyone. It's really fun watching all your questions come up as we speak. So keep them coming, and I'll try not to get too distracted as they come in. So I work for Break charity. So we're an East Anglian-based children's charity who are running one of 8 national innovation-funded Staying Close pilots. And have been doing so for the last couple of years. So about 4 years ago, it probably is now, so Martineri did a review of of residential care and looked at outcomes for children leaving residential care and wanted to test some different models that were kind of along the lines of staying put for children leaving foster care, just to try and improve outcomes, realising and recognising there was quite a cliff edge. So as Break were working across the East Anglia, we partnered up with Norfolk and Cambridgeshire County Councils to pilot a project. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the detail of the project first, and then some of our impacts and outcomes, and you'll also hear from some of the young people who are in the project too. So this is a very, very simple pictorial representation of our model. I hope you can all see the slide. So firstly, every young person who comes into our project is offered a house. So what we do is lease houses from district councils and housing associations. So we've built up relationships with them to acquire 2 and 3 bedroom houses. And it's really, really important part of the project is that we provide young people with somewhere that they can call home and somewhere that provides some stability for them. The young people get some choice over the location of where that house is, but a really important part is that they also are living in shared housing. So you'll see the next, I'm working anti-clockwise. The next bubble is housemates. So every young person has a housemate. This is partly because the young people told us that loneliness was a massive issue when they're leaving care. but also for them to learn to live with other people and to deal with some of the issues that arise from that without having kind of staff there to solve the problems for them. And that's something that you'll hear from some of the young people in a little while. Every young person gets a housing worker, and their primary task is to help the young person be tenancy ready. So that once they leave the project, and the expectation is they're with us for a couple of years, that they're able to manage a tenancy on their own and aren't experiencing things like eviction. Every young person has access to a mentor. So these are local people who are volunteering their time to work and support young people. So it could be particularly around something like employment, or it could be just sort of general, support with how they're getting on with life. There's some of our most fantastic moments have come from the young people's relationships that they've built with the mentors, and certainly we have some absolutely incredible feedback from some of the mentors on how it's impacted on their lives and their understanding of what the issues are facing young people leaving care. Young people have access to a peer network, so this is about supporting each other. And again, it's been incredible seeing groups of young people build up their networks. And so many of them already knew each other, and a lot of them have faced quite similar issues. And again, I think a lot of the strength that they get comes from the networks with each other. Emotional wellbeing service. So whilst we acknowledge that there's the services available in the community, what we have is a specialist emotional wellbeing service that young people can access to deal with any specific issues that they have. And then they also have a transition worker. So this is basically like a key worker who very much works in a needs-led, strengths-based and trauma-informed way. And normally that is for around 7 hours a week, but it flexes very much on what the young person needs. And finally, education and employment and training. So it's very much based on motivational interviewing, and it's supporting them to have, on their pathway really to education or to employment. So we realise that for many of the young people who've come into the project, they haven't been in education, or haven't been in formal education for a long time. So the jump from that to a job may be too great. So we have lots of work placements rather than necessarily moving straight to apprenticeships. We also have apprenticeships as well, but there's lots of stages there that we feel are important. Can I move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the impact so far. So, the things that you'd probably expect to see when you're focusing on these things, but we've had quite a positive impact on the number of young people who are accessing education, employment and training. So significantly higher than the group of care, than a kind of a comparable group in the region. Criminalisation, again, it's around 25% regionally, and we are around 3% of young people who are kind of, having contact with the police and getting involved in criminal activity. 50% of our young people are accessing emotional wellbeing, so what that tells us is there's a need for it, and the feedback from young people is it's a really, really valuable programme, and it's something that they're able to kind of identify the things that they want to talk about rather than having to be on a specific issue that's dictated to them. Homelessness, obviously, when we're providing housing, we're having a huge impact on homelessness. And stability for young people. So when young people leave care, quite a few of the young people that we've worked with have come from being placed in children's homes in other authorities. So often it's about them coming home and not moving around a lot, so they're actually able to stop and stay still. One of the initial parts of the brief that for staying close was around young people being really close to their children's homes. And actually what young people have told us is that they want to live in the cities and the towns and near where their families are rather than within walking distance to their children's homes. Many of them haven't got long-term relationships with people in their children's homes, some of them do, but actually it's more about building up their networks, their kind of informal networks, being near their friends, being near auntie, whoever the people are that are important for them. Next slide, thank you. Are there any questions that I should be picking up on so far?
There are quite a few nuts and bolts questions. You might be coming on to some of these, but I'll just touch on a few.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for your questions. Lots and lots of stuff coming through. So just in terms of where this service is available. Is this just unique to Great Charity and Cambridgeshire and Norfolk at the moment?
Okay, so the answer is yes for our model. There are 8 models being tested nationally, or 8 pilots, but the Department for Education are committed to rolling out Staying Close nationally, so there will be a duty placed on all local authorities to have a Staying Close offer. Now, we're still in the process of building up all the evidence and evaluating the pilots to decide exactly what are the core components that should be available for all young people. Our model, in comparison with many of the others, is quite housing focused. It's very much bringing together housing and social care. Some of the others, it's about a plan working with the young people. Some of the other projects, it's been around, you know, the same staff from the children's home supporting the young people when they leave. So there are some differences, but there is an expectation that there will be a requirement on all local authorities to have a Staying Close offer.
At some point. And actually there is something a bit different about what you're doing with Staying Close to what's been available to care leavers to date. And do you want to just bring that out? Is there something around housing and the importance of that and working with different partners?
Absolutely. So I think the core elements that we're doing that are different, and I think some of this will come out in the learning that I'll just talk about later on, are the fact that all these services focus just on young people leaving care. So I saw someone just ask what age they typically move in. So young people can move in from 16, but we've also had young people move in at 20, because it depends when they want to, when they want to be able to access it. So some young people, for example, might leave care and move home to be with family, or to be with family, and then actually that doesn't work out, or they might move into more of a supported housing provision, and again, for whatever reason, that doesn't work out. So what we offer is something that's available to all young people leaving care when they want it. And one of the key features of our model is that it's lifelong, and again, I'll talk about that a little bit.
Great, so you'll come on to some of those key areas,
yeah.
Including how you work with the housing providers. I think that might be helpful for people to hear more about. So hold those questions, more on that. Just in terms of numbers though, how many young people have you got in the service?
So we've supported around 50 young people so far.
Great.
That we try and work with young people as early as we can. So we strategically, we have plans and spreadsheets with the different authorities. We're in Peterborough as well now, of all the young people who are leaving residential care. So ideally we're getting involved with young people, a year or so before, so we can help prepare them for leaving care. There are some young people who've moved to us though within a week of referral, so it's not always like that. But that's our aim. So some of those young people are in the project now, some of those young people have moved on, and some of them we're working with getting them ready to move in.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of the criteria for matching to your project, what has that been? Are you seeing young people who have had particularly difficult experiences prior to their experience with you, or is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is as a social worker and a commissioner within a local authority, so I'm managing sort of placements for looked after children. So a lot of the young people who came into the project are young people that I've known for 10 plus years, and I was really keen that we worked with some of the most complex young people who had multiple placement breakdowns, who'd come out of Secure, who'd come from YOIs, young people who'd had adoption breakdowns, and to really test the model to see if we could work with the most challenging young people, the people that it's most difficult to create stability for. And it's not, I can't sit here and say it's worked with every single young person, it hasn't, but what we have with all our young people is we still have a relationship with them. So even if then we've had a young person who's unfortunately had to move to some different accommodation, he's still under 18 and we hope he'll move back in when he's 18, but actually he needed more support than we were able to provide. So again, we're still seeing him every couple of weeks, having very, very regular contact with him. So that relationship hasn't broken down, and actually he's doing really well, and hopefully we're a part of that too.
Brilliant. Let's hear from some of the young people that you've worked with. Do you want to move on to?
We've got a short bit of audio which we'll just play for you now, which is a few young people talking about their experiences of the project.
You're helping me with keeping myself clean, money management, how to budget for food and bills, and getting me ready to move into my own property.
How did the support from the Moving On team make you feel?
Easier. It just helped me try and stay a bit calm. I wasn't like angry or but it just reassured me.
They helped me get my confidence up.
Yeah.
Helped me look after myself. And teach me to look after myself.
Where do you think that you would have been living now? Like now you're 18.
I would have been on the street.
Who else would you want involved in helping you move on? I don't know.
Lots of people.
Like who?
Well, I've got Belmore, got
Yeah.
Moving On team. I've got the support from here. I've got work supporting me, and the house supports me.
Okay, so you heard from three of our young people, I think 2 or 3 of our young people there, just talking about what it's like in being in the project and why it's so important to have it. And I've also just got a few quotes here from young people who've talked about how they manage some of the practicals of living together. And the reason I put this in is because I feel it evidences our learning from living model, which is about, rather than sitting in a classroom and teaching young people what it's like when you leave care, but to actually do it. So, you can see there, they're talking about what they do with cooking and cleaning, why it's nice to have a housemate, and how they deal with problems when they come up. And again, they're things that we would all do, aren't they? So, yeah, if I could move to the next slide, that would be great. So I wanted to just really briefly mention what some of our partners have said about us. So Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we have assistant directors sit on the board that meets quarterly, and again the themes are very similar to the themes that you've heard from the young people, but it's about the young people having choice and control. So things like how they decorate, like really practical things, how they decorate their room, where they live, that they feel part of it, that they are actually helping shape it, and that they feel some ownership of the project. And for commissioners, this is, it's really important for them to hear this. And then the social workers and PAs have said that one of the things that they feel is really important is that we've stuck with young people. I mean, you can see a quote there that when every other organisation they know would have thrown in the towel a long time ago. But they've said that this has obviously had an impact on the young people they're supporting, but it's also impacted on the PAs in that they're not feeling anxious about that Friday afternoon phone call of, someone's been evicted, things have broken down, that they know that we'll work with them and that we'll stick with the young person, that we're not going to kind of end the relationship. And it changes the conversation for us as a team working with the young people, because rather than thinking, we'll just end it and we won't have to deal with this anymore, whatever the crisis is at that moment, but actually we're going to be working with them for as long as they need us, therefore we're going to have to come to a solution. So that really helps us stay really solution focused. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so onto the learning so far. So firstly, young people have been involved in the design, delivery and evaluation. For us, when we've tried to cut a corner and not done that, those have been the bits of the project that haven't really worked. And tomorrow I'm with a bunch of young people who at a forum where they come, they feed back to me on a monthly basis about the things that aren't working. And last time it was about whether or not we should have CCTV, what are the things that should be in every house when they move in. So there was discussions around a blender. So it can be real detail, but it can also be, where are we getting to live, the choice that they have over who they're living with, and just about their feelings of leaving care and the support that they get. Buy-in from senior leaders across local authorities, housing and police to create an authorising environment. So for us, this has been absolutely at the core of the project. We wouldn't have been able to do what we've done without that buy-in. And again, a project that improves outcomes for care leavers, it's a really easy sell, if I can use that phrase, but people have wanted to get involved with it. And housing, for them, these young people are their responsibility. So if they're very keen to give us houses, because actually we're hopefully supporting those young people when they're initially leaving care, and then at the end of the 2 years we're able to say to them, look, you've got a really good tenant here, can you prioritise them to have their own property or whatever it is they want from housing moving on. That the support is flexible and personalised and can scale up or down. So again, when people first move in, it could be 30 hours a week, it could be a couple of hours before they're moving out. The idea is that it reduces with time. Providing a place for young people that they can call home. So again, a lot of young people have had so many moves. I think we've had someone with over 100 placement moves, and there are a lot of young people who are in the project, this has been the longest time they've ever been anywhere. So again, thinking about Maslow's hierarchy, that kind of stability in housing at the bottom allows them then to build on and make improvements in other areas of their lives. Providing young people with ongoing relationships. Again, it's very much a relationship-based model that we're doing, embedded in the local offer for care leavers. So again, integrating it into other things that are going on with the local authority. A very positive approach to risk. What we expect, I suppose, in children's homes, there's different requirements, aren't there? And actually, this is about supporting young people to be adults. So if we think about ourselves when we left home, we might have done things that we might not do now. And actually, young people who've had the experiences that this group have generally are much more likely to get involved in drugs. We've had county lines, quite serious mental health difficulties, people falling out. There's all sorts of things happen, and I suppose what we say is in our positive approach to risk is we assess it and we support it, but we also kind of expect it, that we're not expecting them to move out and it's all going to be sweetness and light and everyone's going to get on. We expect people are going to fall out, we expect people are going to get into trouble, we expect people are going to stop going to college. Those are what we'd expect to happen, but we're there to kind of work through those things. And that's not obviously very easy to sit here in a room in London and say, and not always so easy on the ground, but speaking to the team just this morning, there's a couple of things going on at the moment, and that's exactly what's happening. And being a hub for learning, so this is kind of our next step, so things we're piloting over the next year. So we've been piloting personalised budgets, so where young people get to choose how they reach their outcomes. So one of the things I haven't really talked about is their plans, but they all have a plan of the things that they want to change in their lives or to achieve. So they might use their personalised budgets for gyms, gym membership. It might be quite a lot have used it for driving lessons, for travel to get to work. It can be all sorts of different things, but it's for them to choose. We're testing a family group conferencing model to build personal and professional support networks around young people. So again, we've done this really informally up until now, but we want to actually bring the people that they say are important to them in a room and think about how they could be supported. So particularly under 18s, it's about maybe going to Nan's at the weekend, or auntie coming and helping with washing, or it's those things, and building on their own networks. And we've also been linking with Pause, who are another Innovation Fund project, who work with women who've had multiple children removed, and they're really aware that some of those women that they work with have had backgrounds of similar to the young people that we're working with. So how could they bring in their learning earlier? They were quite surprised that we've had no young people become parents in the project. We've had a young person who has had a child removed before coming in, but again, there's something about that relationship-based model, which is very much their model, that is creating kind of better outcomes for young people. I've seen a few questions about costs. So we're trying, at the moment it costs about £423 a week. We're, over the course of this year, looking at getting it to around £250 a week, because there's a lot of additional costs with setups and pilots, which will be in line with what the ring-fenced money that the government imagine, or the DfE imagine, it will be given to the local authorities in a similar way that money's passed down for staying put. So it's expected it's covered.
Also on cost, there are a few questions around housing and how the housing is actually paid for. So who's the landlord, and how is that being commissioned?
So it's the housing is basically funded by housing benefit if the young people are not working or they make a contribution, and something called intensive housing management, which is how housing provision like foyers, YMCA, places like that provide support, and it's also used for adults with learning disabilities as well. So it's an additional payment that's available. So that funds the housing and the housing workers. So it funds a big part of the project. If young people are working, if young people are under 18, the cost is covered by a placement fee from the local authority. But if young people are working, they're able to contribute. And again, we use a similar formula to the formula that's used for young people who are in their foster care placement and have stayed put as to their contribution. So it's affordable and it's linked to how much they're earning.
Great, thank you. Just to touch on a couple of other things that have come through. Somebody has asked about being in touch with foster carers. This is a model which is linked to young people who've been in residential care. So presumably, actually, they're coming straight through residential care placement to you.
Yeah, so some of the young people have come, so they'll have moved from residential care to supported accommodation at 16 or 17, and then they will move to us. Some of our young people will have experienced foster care, but that won't be the placement they move on from. We had a learning event a couple of weeks ago, and the Department for Education said, they are looking at this being available more widely, but at the moment this project is specifically for children leaving residential care. But what I would say is, if you think it should be available more widely, let us know and we can pass your feedback on to the Department for Education or feedback directly.
Thank you. There was another question put around, what about young people not in care or who are not care leavers? What about provision for them? And obviously Rachel's just clarified this is for young people living in residential care, but it doesn't mean that there isn't potential for that. So perhaps bang that drum if you think it needs to be. Just very quickly, you've been really clear that multi-agency buy-in has been absolutely essential to the success of the programme. What's the role of adult social care been? I haven't mentioned that one.
So, if I'm honest, very little. So most of the young people, we've had some young people who've come in with sort of mild learning disabilities who haven't had a service from adult social care. We've got some additional money from the Department for Education to pilot the model with young people with moderate and severe disabilities for the next year. So we're going to be building a relationship with adult services to be able to look at how we work together on that. So I suppose it's a bit of a watch this space and we'll share learning as it comes up.
Brilliant. So just to be really clear with everyone, this is a model that was commissioned for a limited number of just in this area, but there are other similar pilots going on around England only. It's a lifelong model, which is which is great to see. And that funding has been explained to you. However, there are obviously some technical details here that you may be interested to know more about. So, as we said, please feel free to get in touch with Rachel about some of those specific questions if they are relevant to the work that you are doing. We're running out of time, and we've had such a live discussion on the chat board that actually there are still outstanding questions. But I wonder in the final minutes we could just hear from both Rachel and Meg about the next steps for their work and what you can expect to see from their project and how we might be able to take some of this thinking forward. Do you want to go first, Rachel?
Okay, so one of the things that we're looking at is scaling. So we've kind of tested our model across East Anglia, but we're looking at scaling into other areas and sharing our learning as much as we can so that all local authorities are able to benefit from the learning that's happened within the Staying Close pilots. So that's a lot of what we're doing. And then, as I said, some of the different innovations that we're testing, so the family group conferencing and the links with PAWS and developing the personalised budget model as well, and branching out into work with young people who have got moderate to severe learning disabilities as well. So that will be our testing. Our website, the Break website at the moment, is just going through a redesign, so probably in a couple of months there'll be a lot more detail on there, but please contact me on my email or on my phone, and very happy to share or come and talk. We're really keen to improve outcomes for this group of care leavers as much as we can.
Thank you, and all those contact details will be on the slides which you will be receiving. Meg, just some final thoughts about next steps for the social finance model Leaving Well.
Great. So a couple of next steps. The first thing that we're doing is really doing more about understanding how we can use the data coming through Leaving Well in order to inform decision making at a local authority level, but also potentially more broadly in really understanding what are our outcomes and experiences for young people leaving care at the moment? What are the things that work well? What are the things that aren't working well? And how can this data be informing policy and practice? So that's one piece. The second piece is really around the digital tool itself. We see that there are some emerging themes around impact. There's a piece around how a digital tool informs that relationship and practice. And there's a piece around how the digital tool enables a young person's voice to really come through as central through the pathway planning process. We're really keen to kind of work with various people from across the sector as well as local authorities and really understanding how taking what we've done so far, taking the digital tool and the outcomes framework and how that can kind of have the best possible impact. It will be of most use to different people across the sector. So really keen to kind of hear from everyone really. So please do get in touch.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So this is your last chance to ask a question if you haven't asked it already, so quickly type one in now. But just whilst I say a quick thank you to both our contributors today, to Rachel and to Meg, and apologies from Alex. But it's been brilliant to hear about what can be achieved when we really place the young person's strengths and aspirations at the centre of a model or a programme, and actually how different that can feel potentially to the types of experiences or services that might be available elsewhere. There are so many details to both these pieces of work, and recognise that some of your questions are really about the specifics. So what we're going to do is we're just going to round these all up and answer them sort of bullet by bullet in different themes, so that Rachel and Meg can be more specific about some of these questions around tenancy and costs and so on, because I know that's what you want to know about, because you want to think about how it applies in your local area and the work that you're doing. So we will get back to you on that. That's a promise from SCIE.
Can I just say that yes, people are very welcome to come and visit the project. We love to have visitors, yeah, please do come. And if you've got particular questions about the properties particularly and how that model works, more than happy to share all that and share our learning.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you very much, everybody. A goodbye from all of us, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.